I actually have thought that I should sit down and like write out clever retorts for when people yell like Dumbledore and Merlin and shit at me. Yeah. The only one that I have right now is when people go, "You're a wizard, Harry." I go, "Actually, I'm a hairy wizard."
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a bra off.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
Somebody told me at the beginning that I should call it Lying with Lila, and I said I do not like what that implies. Yeah. This is exactly the opposite of what I want to.
Layla, no.
Laying with Lila.
Layla.
I'm Lila, and I am horizontal in Greenpoint, Brooklyn.
And I'm Devin.
And I'm Kevin.
And we're horizontal, too.
We are horizontal.
We are laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Laid back.
Prone to the bone. Slanted and enchanted.
Oh, that was such a good title. Slanted and enchanted. Horizontal is slow radio. It's consensual eavesdropping. It's intimacy of all kinds. It's us lying down, wearing robes, sharing secrets for your ears. Season 3 mostly consists of threesomes, whereas in Season 1 and 2 I was lying down with a single guest at a time. Many of my Season 3 episodes will have me lying down with 2 people at a time, in this case, between 2 wizards. These 2 humans are in some kind of relationship with one another. Thus far, I've had a manager and his/her trauma specialist client, co-hosts of a sexuality conversation series called The Discerning Dick, primary poly-kinky romantic partners, and now, wizard friends, and esoteric collaborators. In this episode, I lie down with Devin and Kevin. I've known about Devin for years. My former housemate Tiger, whom you heard from in Season 1, used to say my wizard friend quite casually in conversation. But it wasn't until Lola Jean's Kinky Carnival when we became properly acquainted and made a podcast pact. He fulfilled his part of the pact months ago. My episode of his series, This Podcast is a Ritual, is called How to Take Life Lying Down, and in it we talked at a moderate incline about the origin of my horizontal curiosity, couples therapy, reflective listening, and my working definition of intimacy. Then I made a call for closing rituals in order to end our romantic relationships with grace. I also cast you a little spell. I am truly delighted by my blossoming friendship with Devin. He is impossibly quick-witted and fantastically charismatic, adventurous in spirit, and eternally playful. I get the sense that he could communicate with anybody, anywhere, for any amount of time. His long, white blonde beard never fails to make me smile, and I'm excited for our friendship to grow, because he's one of the humans in this world that I wish to bring my conundrums to and lay them out before him, just to see what his brain will do with them. He's something like your most compassionate therapist, if your therapist were a young, handsome Dumbledore proficient in computers who studied improv at Second City for 7 years. If you listen to his podcast or participate in any of his events, like The Wizarding Hour, a collaboration with Kevin, or The Wizard Walkabout, in which 50 of us took the ceremonial gummy bears and went gallivanting about Central Park on 420, guided by the wizard in person, as well as the wizard in our ears, then you'll know Devin has a thing for numbers. Not for nothing, I also took part in a sex magic ritual for his podcast on 6/9, from 6 to 9 p.m., with between 6 and 9 people. His fiancée, L.A. Marks, had me on her poetry podcast, A Daily Dose of Poetry, and just last week told a tale of bisexual discovery at my horizontal storytelling pajama party, the Summer Pride edition. On their mailbox is written, The Poet and the Wizard. Can you imagine the glory of such a wedding? Kevin is a musician, a senior UX designer, and one of Devin's dear friends. Their friendship has mostly taken place in the ether, in the form of wizard emails, the records of which form a virtual diary, a correspondence that marks the living of our lives, in the way that perhaps our grandparents wrote to their cousins. Kevin was formerly the proprietor of Tarot Society, which was a center for the curious to gather in Bushwick and muse about things hidden and obscure. Devin and Kevin used to host a summer series there called New Age and Chill. I never dropped by when Tarot Society was in existence, so now I will have to entice Kevin to give me a reading at a pop-up or a party. His mischievous eyes and delight in getting away with things make me quite curious about the wizardry of his tarot. The day of this recording was the first time I met Kevin, and since he is by nature a private person, I am grateful that he chose to share, in the service of friendship and intimacy, in this way, in this medium, with all of us. Thank you, Kevin. In this episode, the first half of our conversation, we talk about the origin of the white-collar wizard emails, middle school boys and cock-shaming, Devin's first acid trip, which was in 8th grade, the grand bohemia of Olympia, Washington, learning that you aren't supposed to come too fast if you have a penis, sleep sexing, the question, what is your other sex like? Devin's wizard Tinder profile, 80s penthouse, imprinting on your first porn, Kevin's therapist, ethical porn for dicks, shamey, judgmental sex, and how some fantasies should just remain fantasies. In the next episode, 86, the second half of our conversation, Devin and Kevin actually read us some of those private wizard emails. We discuss what it means to be a present-day tarot dealer and a modern wizard. And Devin tells us the truly incredible, as in, if you saw it in a movie, you'd say that never happens in real life, and the incredibly true tale of how his hair turned wizard white. To listen to that episode, and for access to the full horizontal, which includes all the part 2s, plus a monthly video containing a pearl of intimacy wisdom, become a patron of the Horizontal Arts. Patreon is the love child of crowdfunding and a subscription service. Find me there at patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. And now, come lie down between two wizards. Do you have a name for your wizard friendship?
We do. Well, I mean, we had a name for the emails.
Yeah.
So we could...
What are they called?
Well, so it was called the White Collar Wizards because Devin and I realized that we both worked for corporate tech companies at the time. He still does. I work for a different place now.
Still a corporate tech company.
Still a corporate tech company, yeah. And we were...
we have office jobs.
We have white-collar tech...
Desk wizards.
Desk wizards. And we were both not satisfied with how our lives were kind of shaping up around that. Because we both were doing other stuff outside of work. I was running Tarot Society, and Devin was, being on his path to becoming a professional wizard. And we developed this as a means to provide support.
Support for your esoterica, in a way?
Well, our angst and boredom, actually.
Exactly.
We had jobs that we had gotten really complacent in, and it sounds lame, and it's really annoying when you talk to someone who's really, really stressed out about their work situation or is broke and is stressed about that, to then say, oh, yeah, but I go to work and I look at Facebook all day, and it's driving me crazy. And Kevin actually was in the same boat as I was, and we decided to form a magical communication partnership to get us out of those ruts and give us some sort of accountability and a way just to check in. So if I got into that stretch of procrastination at 2 PM, I could say, wait a minute, I'm going to write a wizard email, and then in that wizard email, I'll maybe set a positive intention of what I'm going to do differently, and then, he can check in on that, and we have a little bit more accountability than when the boss isn't paying attention and you're just goofing off for way too long.
But that's what it turned into, right? Initially...
No, that was the initial intent.
Yeah, it was intentionally that way.
So let me read you the very first communication.
Yes, please.
The subject line is New Age and Chill, Hangout, not Event. Hey, dude. That's dude spelled with 2 zeros, by the way.
I see it.
It's been a while, and I know you're probably still re-acclimatizing post-meditation retreat, but I'd love to schedule a long overdue hangout night. I'd love to hear about your Vipassana experience, talk reality, do a wizard consult, play with hypnosis, or maybe a loose combination of all the above. Is there a good weeknight for you sometime in the next couple weeks? And
when was that sent?
That was sent September 6th, 2016.
Oh, wow.
And so Kevin and I were friendly acquaintances, but we weren't by any means close friends at that point. And we never really hung out one-on-one. And he'd mentioned to me that his wife and business partner and him were possibly separating. And I sensed that this was someone who needed a friend to go and get a drink with and talk it out and just have someone listen. And so I extended that offer, and we scheduled a time to go hang out, and we met at the fabulous Flowers for All Occasion, a bar in Bushwick that was pretty much equidistant between our two places, and had a great time chatting. Went back to my place and did some tarot readings and talked about, his relationship and our work frustrations, and realized that we were both dealing with a lot of these similar issues and wanted to do some sort of ritual-esque thing. And a good first step seemed like, well, let's just start sending each other emails. And shortly after that meeting, that's what we began doing.
I think I wrote the first actual WCW email, so I can go back to that one.
WCW is
White Collar Wizards.
White Collar Wizards, right.
But I think, was it? Actually, I sent the first one on a Wednesday, and I saw like Wizard Crush Wednesday.
And I was thinking, I was like, Wizard, Chill Wizard.
No.
The funny aside while he's looking for that is the subject of the other one was New Age and Chill, because I'd made a joke to him about his event space, Tarot Society. I said, hey, we should have an event called New Age and Chill where we just pump Enya into the streets of Bushwick and hand out free popsicles. And
popsicles?
Yeah.
Well, that would be the chill. It would be like a hot summer day. They had air conditioning. So he said, if it's hot outside, we'll hand out popsicles and we'll blast Enya and we'll call it New Age and Chill. That was when everyone was making all those Netflix and chill jokes.
Genius.
And what's really interesting is that ended up being a real event that became the other, I guess, tentpole of our friendship and bonding. And so that became a reoccurring event at Tarot Society. But before that, it was an email subject line.
The email is September 15th, 2016.
WCW Thoughts.
WCW Thoughts is the first one. Spending only 15 minutes on this today because I have my daily stand-up meeting at 9:45. Small wins this morning, got up at 5:15 a.m., meditated for 30 minutes, read about the origins of Zen and its placement in Buddhist history for 30 minutes. Good, but I did not sleep very much and am now feeling a little run down. Not doing so good on the keeping up health part, will drink much water today. Wondering if hour-long team meetings count as wins in the job sphere. I think yes. Showing up is important, so I figured I can do 1 hour-long meeting and then 1 hour for Tarot Society emails before noon. In other news, we had a perfectly amiable conversation last night when I got home, my ex. She told me about her upcoming Tinder dates, fine, and we had some sort of stoner conversation. I can't even remember, but it was all good. Progress. But in the shower this morning, where I got all my best thinking done, I was like, I really need a room with walls and a door that closes, like soon. Sleeping on an air mattress in the living room is getting old quick. Must manifest a sublet or something. Really great to hang out last night. Thank you. It felt really good to talk about that stuff, especially the whole bisexual thing. It's gradually becoming less weird to me. Anyway, this is the jam that was on at Flowers last night as we were leaving. So good. And as characteristic, I sent a YouTube link to some song that we were listening to.
What is the
I don't
song?
even remember.
Can we listen?
Let's check it out.
Let's see what it is.
Do you know this DJ named Vice? Weiss. They're like a techno DJ, does it at Bossa a lot. But they were jamming this sick Indian song. And as it's like 29 minutes long.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you listen to this when you opened the email?
I listened to some of Kevin's links.
What? You don't pour over every single one?
We've sent a lot of emails. They're mostly Aphex Twin covers.
They mostly are.
And a lot of links.
This is the music of Darwad I'm not going to even begin to pronounce that. It's a raga. It's 29 minutes long of this woman singing. It rules.
Wow.
But anyway, that's the kind of thing we were listening to at the Flowers for All Occasions.
I want to take it back.
Take it back.
I want to take it back. And the way I want to take it back is by asking you, what did you learn about sexuality and intimacy growing up?
What a great question. I remember having conversations with my mom about where babies came from, and my parents were always pretty forthright and honest and totally comfortable to have an uncomfortable conversation. There wasn't awkwardness around that. But I remember where the awkwardness came was in 5th grade, where I was living in Indiana and we had a sex health ed class, but like a very basic one. And
Just
some
periods and
some of that, I don't even remember, but I remember specifically that the teacher brought up masturbation. And when we're like,
wow,
what?
That's great.
But we're like, what is that? He said, it's when a guy like scratches himself and they think it feels good.
A guy?
Well, I think that they gender separated us for this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we were like the boys.
Scratches.
And like a baseball player like scratching his junk kind of thing. And I remember that was very confusing and we did not understand that. And then I moved to Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts had friends in middle school that I remember in art class asking one of them, like, how do you masturbate?
Wow.
Because I had this weird image of like you
Scratching
yourself and it feels good. And I'm like, I can, rub my penis with the heel of my hand or something.
You know where I think that comes from? I've heard other people refer to a textbook that said that it was sort of like the relief you get after scratching an itch or sneezing a sneeze.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I just remember this kid taking a pencil and showing me, like that. Like,
so you're pinching 2 fingers and
you're
just
pinching 2 fingers and stroking on the pencil.
With the thumb and the pointer finger going away from the body.
Yeah. And I go, all right, that seems like it makes sense. And then
just the 2 fingers, though.
Well, I mean, it was on a pencil. I was getting the basic mechanics.
I mean, how big were you at that age, really?
Must have been fairly small.
I don't know, man. I was a pretty ripping 6th grader.
Whoa. Were you? Is that really a thing? Did you feel like you were overdeveloped? Did you compare penis size with other people? I know people did that. Yeah. A lot of people did that.
So the memory that I have about that came later, and it was in 8th grade, and it was this guy that was the first person that I really started smoking pot with and exploring drugs. And he was really short and people teased him about having a small penis. And at some point he went into the bathroom and came out and was holding a toothbrush with his finger like pressed against it. He's like, my dick's not that small. It's like, it's this big. And I was like, dude, that is insanely small. Like that is, I was like, I wasn't trying to, I was like, my dick's the size of that toothbrush. And realized that, that it was a different story.
That there was a discrepancy there. Yeah. Were you aware that you were shaming him in that moment?
I mean, I don't think consciously. I mean, yes, I was aware that I was shaming him because that was the kind of interplay that middle school boys tend to have is shaming as humor and shaming as just the flow of conversation. So it was not an environment where I felt like we were talking sensitively about our feelings. Well,
sure. But were those the kind of friendships that you had at that time?
I mean, again, middle school boys. So it wasn't like I had, that friendship was interesting because that was more someone that was outside of my norm. Like my parents got the vibe that this was more of a bad kid and they weren't as thrilled that I was hanging out with him. My other friendships were a little bit more wholesome and relatable. I guess he was just an outlier in my social group. So.
What made him bad? Like the people that my parents didn't want me to hang out with were, interestingly enough, people who were into Ouija boards and Wicca, I
And
guess.
look at you now.
And
Sandwich
between
two wizards.
between two wizards. Yeah, it's all been downhill from there,
You
right?
are the cream filling of a wizard whoopie pie.
Yes, I am.
In my town, there was a neighborhood that had been cottages for vacation. This was in Massachusetts, where Kevin and I are both from, actually. And there was a neighborhood that was originally cottages by a pond for vacationing Bostonians. And so they were pretty small. And as the town built up, that became houses that people lived in all the time. And it wasn't like a horrible part of town, but it was definitely, compared to the other suburbs and cul-de-sacs, it had a more towny feel and was definitely a little bit more working class. And this friend had a single mom who was a nurse and worked weird hours, and an older sister that dated a guy that, I think the older sister was a senior in high school. We were in 8th grade, and this boyfriend was 19 or 20. And so this kid had a pipeline to drugs and things that were not available widely. And it was really funny because he was very, very short, and he had these really thick Coke bottle lenses. So it wasn't like anybody's idea of a total badass, but he was definitely more thuggish than my other friends, and my parents just sensed it. Like, they definitely knew that he didn't talk to the same way that my other friends did. My other friends would make conversation with them, and he was more distracted and not as relatable.
Did you keep being friends with him?
No, I don't even know I think maybe, what even happened? I think maybe he went to a different high school. We were friends in 8th grade, and that was the beginning of my exploration of the drug world. And then I really wasn't friends with him much after that. I got heavily into punk and did my own thing after that point.
I'm really curious as to how that kind of shaming early on played out through his sexual life, and if it affected his using drugs to, dull the shame and such. But we don't know. So you then were aware, oh, I have a big cock. Mm-hmm. And did that give you swagger? Was that something that you prided yourself on?
Well, it's funny because I remember the girl that I had a crush on in 8th grade, he and her lost their virginity to each other in, I think, the little, when I say woods, I mean like a little scrappy patch of bushes behind his house, while some of his sister and her boyfriend's like older friends like were in a car and kept like turning on the headlights and fucking with them. So
as you
whoa.
do in Massachusetts.
Yeah. And so he lost his virginity, and I did not lose my virginity until between my junior and senior year of high school. So it was a while before I wasn't convinced that I had a big cock. I just didn't really think too much about it. And I guess it was more the idea that this guy had a small one. And then, I think that didn't really come up in my life until later on.
What are your early experiences of pleasure?
Are we talking sexual pleasure or just pleasure in general?
Both, right?
Both.
And because I'm always trying to expand people's notion of what pleasure is and what intimacy is and what sex is. And I'm very curious about early memories of feeling pleasure and regarding it as pleasure. And I'm also curious about any early attraction to magic and ritual and
Sure. So, unfortunately, I don't have any, Proustian memories of Madeleines or anything so concrete as simple pleasures of my childhood. But in the sexual realm, I can speak to that more confidently. At some point, I'm the oldest of 4 boys, and at some point, my parents were going away for the afternoon, and this was when I still lived in Indiana, so this is before 6th grade. And I went to go put in a movie that we had rented for my brothers, and whatever the tape was in the VCR that I pressed play on popped up, and it was porn. And my brother's like, what's this? And I ejected it. And I don't think I even fully understood what was happening, but I took the tape, put the movie on for them, went to the other room where we had a small little TV in this back room, and sat and watched porn for like 4 hours. Not masturbating, not really knowing what to do, but just rapt that I had found this thing.
Whose porn was it?
It was my father's porn. When my parents got home, my brothers said something, and so my parents realized that this had happened. And I remember that my dad came in to have a conversation about it with me and was very open of, I heard this happened, I rented that for me. I'm sorry that you found it. And I think most of my questions, because I had gone to the video store with him, so I think most of my questions were about, I felt weirdly betrayed that he'd somehow accomplished this secret rental under my nose at the video store. Like adults aren't doing secret things in front of kids all the time.
I love it.
And then he was very, do you want to know about sex? About how your mom and I have sex? Any of this thing? And I was like, no. I was like, absolutely not. And my brother, I think, asked a bunch of questions and had a much longer talk with him about it. So that was an early exposure.
You just didn't want to talk to him about it.
I was just very, I felt very awkward. I did not want to have that conversation. I wanted it, I think I wanted it to like explore it privately and not talk about it with my dad.
Yeah.
And around the same time, AOL discs were arriving in the mail. This was the glorious days of dial-up 90s internet. And one of my other friends had internet. We didn't have it yet. And we would hang out and try and search for internet porn and find very slowly loading images of naked ladies. And I remember, this is such a weird memory because I had obviously seen breasts in some way before, but I remember being really surprised by nipples. That like, I think in my mind, I had imagined breasts as just kind of smooth
and flat.
And these pink pixelated nipples were a little bit surprising. And then we moved.
And when you say nipple, you mean the whole thing, the areola,
the whole pink business, yeah.
If it was pink.
If it's pink, all the varieties of nipples. I'm, I guess, remembering my own specific experience. And again, this was, we were obviously sexually interested enough to lock ourselves in the family computer room and look at this for a long time and be patient enough to deal with 90s internet speeds. But we weren't masturbating. And then...
Who's we?
My friend and I. This is a friend of mine from elementary school. And then when I moved...
Not the same friend?
No. Different friend.
But this is a friend that you were closer with?
This is one of my really good friends from when I was growing up and was little boys and running around and playing games. And
so you said, hey, I watched this video.
I don't know if I probably told him that I did see that. I think I told another friend that after I got tired of watching this movie and I went to a friend's house, and I think I probably told him that I discovered something. But I don't remember the exact order of all of this. I just remember the general sequence, that there was that initial found tape, and then there was early internet porn, which is not, I don't think we were looking at things that were hardcore. I think we were looking at pictures of naked ladies. And then I moved, and in the move, that's when my family finally got internet. And then in middle school, it became me versus the AOL parental controls and figuring out ways around it, or searching in vain only to click on a link and then get blocked.
How'd you get around it?
I think there was one point where my parents were logged in and I just changed the permission on my account. I forget. It seemed like there would be periods where I would be able to disable it, and then there would be periods where it would get turned back on and I would be trying to figure out what to do.
How much older are you than all of your siblings?
I'm 2 years older than my closest brother, and then 9 years than the youngest.
How do you think growing up in a household mainly comprised of boys affected your friendships and your viewpoint on relating to humans, relating to people?
There's a memory that I have that's very clear of being in middle school. And like I was saying, middle school boy communication is a lot of teasing and joking and shaming and all of those things all rolled into one. And my mom had said something about, how did it go? I think my analysis is kind of seeping into the actual experience. But I remember that my mom had mentioned at various points the difference between good attention and bad attention. Like, you know, I would bug my brothers. I would just start some shit with them just because I was bored, and they would do that to me, and we did that to each other. We like squabbled. We're a group of boys. And
physically?
Or just be annoying. Like someone is sitting contentedly watching TV and then someone else walks and throws a remote at them. Like it's really obnoxious Three Stooges level stuff of just poking and annoying people. And as I was going through middle school, and 6th and 7th grade was me being really into Metallica and loving Nintendo Power Magazine and playing a lot of N64 and having friends that were into Star Trek and Star Wars and just being kind of nerdy and dorky. And then 8th grade, I was discovering drugs and punk rock. And I ended up taking acid in 8th grade. And
wow.
Yeah. And on the other side of that trip, I remember having this click moment where I realized that a lot of my engagement was bugging and negative attention, and I should do that less. And it was not by any means I am then perfect. I was still a fairly sarcastic asshole throughout high school and continued to have that kind of provoke a response communication. But it was definitely a big shift where I think I was maturing and I was letting go of those patterns of attention is attention. Just pay attention to me, somebody.
Was attention scarce in your household?
Probably to some extent just because there was 4 of us, but I think I'm also very oriented around attention seeking. I'm someone who in my adult life dresses like a wizard and walks around in public. So, you know, it's somewhere there in the wiring. My parents actually have told me stories about as a baby, they would be in the grocery store and I would be looking around and I would make eye contact with someone and get the person to smile. And as soon as they smiled at me, I'd be like, done with you. And then I would be looking for somebody else.
That, wow. Lovely.
Yeah.
And witnessing your parents' relationship, what did you learn about relationshiping?
My parents' relationship was interesting to me because they were very stable. They never fought. The fights that I can remember them, I could probably, count on one hand.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very calm. They were very smart and reasonable people, and I really didn't see them fight that much. I didn't see them, it wasn't like they were cold and emotionless or anything, but they weren't super physically intimate in front of me. I had a friend who lived across the street when I was growing up, and I remember that his parents would have this kind of make-out kiss whenever he came home from work, and my parents felt a lot more chaste. I never heard them have sex. I was not aware of their sex life aside from my dad offering to talk to me about it that one time when I found his porn. And it was interesting to me for a long time because, it was very stable and almost, it was interesting when I later made friends and realized that other people's families and home life had been very different, or, friends who had come from divorce and had to witness their parents fighting a lot, whereas I had never seen it.
Do you think that made you less inclined to really think about relationships because it just seemed like a given? It was just natural. And
I think to the extent where I didn't have much anxiety about it. I guess when I was in high school, I wanted to be having sex and wished that I had a girlfriend, but I didn't have a car, and I didn't really want my mom to drive me on awkward little dates to the movie. That seemed mortifying. And so I think other people who came from a different background might be really like, am I ever going to find somebody? And I've, had periods of singledom that were frustrating and lonely, but have generally connected to people well and done a decent job of talking through things, and have certainly been in relationships where I fought way more than I would have liked to, but have, I think, generally had good communication modeling from that background.
Was your sexual debut positive?
I thought so. I was stoked.
Can you set the scene? What was it like?
So when I was in high school, a friend of mine was very into LiveJournal and wrote very emo poetry on LiveJournal that people in LiveJournal land loved.
Which was literally a journal blog, right? Online that people could read.
It was like an early version of blogging. And I thought his poetry was weird and nonsensical and cheesy, but he had correspondences and pen pals with various emo girls across the state and country. And one of them that he was sort of pseudo dating came to visit him. And for whatever reason, he invited me to go out to dinner with them. It was so bizarre because I was basically like a third wheel on their date. But he was not that interested in her, and she and I totally hit it off. And we tried to be boyfriend and girlfriend for a minute, but she lived like 2 hours away, so it didn't work. And then we ended up in this weird situation where we wouldn't talk for months at a time, and then one of us would have she was a couple years older than me, so we'd have like a school break coming up, a winter holiday, and then we'd get in touch and say, hey, do you want to come visit? And I'd say, yeah. And then I would come out and hang out with her, and we'd have this awesome time, and it was really great. We didn't have sex, but we would fool around for sure. And then I would go back and we wouldn't really talk that much, and then it would happen again, and we had this great little thing. And
when you say fooling around, what were you doing?
It's so funny.
It's hard. So broad.
I know. And it's been funny because it's hard for me to remember, even in my own life. I'm like, I know that we got naked a lot, but I can't really picture what we were doing. She never sucked my dick, and I remember that the fooling around was always a little awkward because I didn't really feel like I had permission to come. I think there was definitely a few times that I came in my underwear or something, but you know, we're fooling around in her bed. It's like her parents' house.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't, I didn't know really what the etiquette was. It wasn't like, oh, let's fool around for a bit and then I'm going to jerk you off and then we're going to go to sleep and like, we've completed it. So it would be long periods of making out and touching and, you know.
Can you just say that again because of the motorcycle?
It'd be long periods of making out and touching and being naked and rubbing on each other. And we never really, you know, sex wasn't something it always felt very tentative. Like I was excited when it seemed that she was open to doing more and we were progressing, but it always seemed like at any moment, you know, a hand was going to grab mine and we were going to not do something. And
so it was the sort of traditional narrative of her being the gatekeeper of sexuality and you needing to like try things but not go too far so you didn't get your hand smacked out of the cookie jar.
Yes, exactly. And so we would do that, and then she graduated and she moved away to Olympia, Washington, and she came back for a visit and we hung out, and it was like an immigrant in the 1800s writing back to their family in Eastern Europe. And Olympia was this amazing place, and there's all of this cool art, and you can go climb on the rooftops, and it was just incredible. And so we made plans for me to come visit. And after my junior year of high school, I flew out to Olympia to stay for a month and live with her in a house full of young 20-somethings. And she and I did not actually work out. I think I did not know how to negotiate and deal with it, and I don't think her communication was great either. I remember a lot of her locking herself in the bedroom, and I didn't know what I'd done, and would be like, are you coming out? Like, we were all planning to go do a thing with your roommates. Like, are you not doing that now? Like, what's happening? Okay, you're not talking to me. I'm going to go do this thing with your roommates. So I made friends with all of her roommates, and was just, my mind was blown. Like, it was the most magical thing ever. For years, guidance counselors have been telling me that I needed to get my act together or I was going to have to work at McDonald's and live this unemployed, horrible starvation lifestyle.
Whoa.
And then my school was very focused on you've got to go to college or else. And then here I am, surrounded by young kids that are working part-time jobs, and they live in houses together and watch art films during the day and smoke pot. and then go out to house shows at night and ride bikes and go get coffee and go swim. And it was just Neverland.
Vacation.
It was paradise.
Vacation life.
Vacation life. But that was not just me on vacation. That was like the feel of that place. And I had a great time. Definitely knew that I was going to move there. Did not work out with her, but connected with all these other people. And one of the other roommates was older. So I was 17. The girl I was seeing was probably 19. And then one of the roommates was 21 and seeing a guy that was maybe 23.
And at this time, your hair is brown.
And my hair is brown.
You have no beard.
I have no beard. I'm 17. And I connected with this other girl that was, living at the house, and we didn't do anything, but we just had a good friendship. And then when I went back home to reality, which was a hard transition, she was actually coming back. She was also from Massachusetts, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Massachusetts. Do you want to come hang out? We're going to go drive to New York City and stay with our friends in Jersey, and then go to the Siren Music Festival out on Coney Island. Do you want to come?" And I was like, 100%. And we had this great connection, but it had never really been, that flirtate. I mean, it was a great connection, but it wasn't overtly flirtatious because we were dating other people. And I came out to see her in Northampton, Massachusetts. And the first night that I got there, we got Sobe from a convenience store and poured vodka in it and drank vodka and Sobe and wandered around town. And I think went skinny dipping with her friends. And it was just really, really fun. And then ended up back at wherever we were staying at, her place, a friend's place. And we're laying in bed. And I think we were going to share the bed was the plan. And I woke up and we were making out. And
what do you mean you woke up and you were making out?
I remember that we were hanging out in bed and kind of cuddling, but not really doing anything. And then I woke up and we were doing stuff. This has happened to me before, or no, not before then, but since. I continue, even with my current partner, have times where I will sleep initiate.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I had this lover when I was traveling. I traveled for nearly a year. I kind of nomaded a bit. And I was in Nancy, France. I was visiting a tango dancer friend of mine. And he was an opera singer. And he was in an opera with this man, this German man, this beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed German man. And at that time, I thought all opera singers looked like Luciano Pavarotti. And so when he showed up at the door, I was like, oh my God, hello, swing, like meow. And so when we wound up engaging and we had sex and then we went to sleep, he put his underwear back on. And I said, why are you putting your boxers briefs back on? That seems strange. And he said, because I often wake up and he was cheating. I often wake up in the act of fucking my girlfriend.
Yep.
Wow.
I know.
Thing?
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
I realized that it didn't happen all the time, but I realized that I had a few situations where I was having like platonic sleepovers with people, and I realized that I was like, I need to warn you that this has happened now, because it's not going to be believable if it's in the middle of the night.
Definitely not going to be plausible.
Yeah, I've had.
I was sleeping. I didn't know what I was doing.
I've had relationships start that way, where it's similar to this, where we were close, connecting, just having that really, unspoken crush kind of connection with someone where you're talking a lot. It's so great. And then we end up sharing a bed. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like coming out of a dream. And I'm like, this feels so hot and sexy. What's going on? And I'm like, oh my God, my finger is inside someone. Like, whoa.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm like,
whoa,
what's happening?
We need to hold for a second. This is just like,
the
it's
noise.
like really, really loud. Can you just like rewind for a second?
Oh, sure. I thought you were like, we need to hold because like this story is so intense.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
No, but so I've woken up and I am grinding against someone and kind of cupping their breast and rubbing their underwear or underneath it, and I like, oh shit, like, is this okay? Like, am I sleep molesting somebody? Like, what is happening?
Did they give you sleep consent?
And then I will be like, slow down, and they're like, keep going. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's cool.
Right.
Or I'll be like, is this okay? And they're like, yes, go for it. I'm like, okay, great. And so, yeah, sleep has been the lubricant into sexual adventure a few times. And with my current fiance, we've had multiple times where we've woken up to have incredibly hot, otherworldly sex. Like some of like the most insane, passionate, just it's out of control. Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. So to close the loop on the story, that's what happened is we fell asleep. I woke up and we were making out and fooling around, and then that continued to progress. And I had only had these tentative hookups before where I thought it was going to end at any moment and my hand was going to get slapped away, and was not great about communicating because it felt way too fragile to speak out loud.
Oh, yes.
And then all of a sudden, this person is like, I'm going to get on top of you, and straddles me and grabs my neck and puts me inside of her. And I'm like, amazing. I'm having sex. I've lost my virginity. Like, I did it. This is great. And
she had some experience.
She had experience. Yeah. And this is embarrassing, but this is the whole point of your podcast, is to be open about these intimate things. So
definitely.
I'll gladly discuss it. So despite having gone through sex ed, we did not use a condom. That was not discussed. She just got on top of me. I had no idea about, like, I only knew the ideal world of sex ed where it's like you use a condom and spermicide and you do all of these things. I did not know the real world of sometimes you have unprotected sex, but do not come inside somebody. Like that's no bueno. And I guess I just assumed, like, oh, well, if she's fucking me without a condom, she must be on birth control or something. So totally came inside her, but then I think felt embarrassed that I'd come too soon. And that was the thing that I really remembered from that early adolescent sexuality, was this message from American Pie movies and pop culture that was like, sex has to last forever. Like, it's embarrassing to come, basically.
A long time.
Yeah, like,
don't prematurely ejaculate because then you're the butt of jokes.
I'll be back in 15 minutes. Only 15 minutes. Like, this idea that sex should be forever and
hours
and hours and hours. And so I did not tell her that I came. I just continued to try having sex as I slowly lost my erection until she figured out that obviously I had come and then got off of me. And then we continued to have a ton of sex for the rest of that little adventure as we drove to New Jersey, stayed with her friends, went to this music festival and came back. And it was amazing. I was very excited to be able to have more sex and prove that I could do a better version than I did that initial time. And I didn't tell her that I wasn't virgin. Maybe she knew. I didn't make it clear.
With you ejaculating inside her each time because you hadn't learned any better in the meantime, right?
No, she did not correct that. And so I assumed that she was on birth control and was fine with it. But yeah, it was later that I then understood the pull-out method was considered a common courtesy in those situations.
Indeed.
As well as learning how to discuss it and also realize that women don't want you to try and fuck them for 2 hours every time you have sex. People like you to come and like sex to have an end and don't want to have an infinite number of orgasms.
Some people get sore.
So yeah, I didn't date that person. We just had sex a bunch the week that I lost my virginity. And then she lived in Olympia and, I was casually friends with her when I moved out there. But with my first girlfriend, I remember that was the lesson that I slowly came to was it's okay to come. Because I remember that there would be, not quite sexual dysfunction level, but I would be working so hard to try not to come that I would kind of lose the momentum and then wouldn't come. And it was like,
then you had to just decide on a stopping point.
Then you just have to decide on a stopping point. And yeah, it was very nice. I don't know exactly when, but when I eventually figured out, if you got to come and then talk to the other person. And do they need more? Do they want something else? You can have sex later.
I have been trying to unlearn for the past 5 years this notion that is still deeply ingrained that sex ends when the penis ejaculates.
Yeah.
That's like all right, we're done now, and it wasn't until I met Kenneth, who's my housemate and a sex educator, and started going to Dr. Jana's workshops and where she said, use your words, use your hands, so it wasn't until my 30s that if I hadn't come yet, I would reach down and masturbate, or I would say, I learned to find, playful ways to be like, oh, you're not done yet.
Yeah.
Oh, come back here, and I didn't have lovers who, they weren't all deeply inconsiderate lovers. Some of them were, but they weren't all. They just didn't think about it because that meant it was over to them. When they came, it was the sexual act was concluded, and they just didn't think, has she come? Would she like to? Is there more I can do? And
there is a refractory period which affects men differently, but like you can go from like, this is amazing, I am so turned on, this is everything, to being like, oh, like reality sets in quickly and my interest in sex decreases significantly.
Right.
But I think as my sexuality developed, it was really, really nice to learn just to say things. Whether that was, instead of trying to do the weird lean in and hope that this is going to be a successful kiss, to just go, can I kiss you? And then someone would go, I'd prefer if you didn't. I go, great, let's continue hanging out. And it's so much easier to move past that than the awkwardness of the failed lean, and negotiating how we're going to have sex and where I'm going to come, when I'm going to come.
Right.
Or if, I'm drunk and I'm not able to get an erection, then being honest and saying, hey, I'm drunk and I'm not going to be able to get an erection. I want to keep fooling around. Can I do something else for you? And like just owning that confidently felt really powerful, actually, and was really nice to be able to do that and see people react positively and be like, oh, so glad that we didn't, this wasn't you silently trying to prove a point to me for the next 30 minutes.
Yes. Oh, did you learn to announce, like, I'm going to come, I'm about to,
Yeah, I definitely realized, it's so funny because I just remember this message like burned in of like, coming is failure, basically, like, like that fear of not even premature ejaculation, but I think it translated to me as
just don't ejaculate
like,
at all.
You want to, well, not at all, but like, I didn't know when it was okay. I didn't know when you could cross the finish line because I really wanted to do right by my partner. I wanted to give them tens of orgasms and the best sex they've ever had. I really wanted to like succeed, and eventually learning that coming wasn't a disappointment for my female partner. It was hot. It was great. Like, yeah, come on my tits. Like, come on me. Like that's great. Like, now we can do something else and we'll have more sex later. Like, it's totally fine. A quickie is great. Like, no problem. So eventually I learned that. And then I learned how to ask when and where, or even to, hold on, I don't want to come yet. Please stop doing that, or I'm going to. And I would like to avoid that because this is hot and I want to keep going.
How did you learn techniques? Were you talking with your peers, with your male friends about sex? Were you teaching each other? Were you trading tips? Were you trading porn? Were you...
In high school, porn was private. Like, I talked to it about it to some extent with my friends, but it was not like a topic of conversation, really. My friends that had sex, and when I had sex, like, I definitely talked to them and, compared notes and learned a little bit like that. But I think it was when I started having sex with people that I became so curious. So after we had sex, I would want to know, what is your other sex like? I only have sex when I'm there. That's pretty much my default. I'm always there when I'm having sex.
Well, you hope you're there.
I hope I'm there. But
a lot of people aren't there.
Or sometimes I'm asleep. But then I was curious about, well, what are other people like? And I would want to hear their horror stories because it was baffling to me, the things that other guys thought were acceptable, and just hear what it's like in general and learn what they like. And I asked a lot of questions. And when I moved to Olympia, The Stranger is the alt weekly paper in Seattle, and it was available throughout Olympia. And that's the paper that Dan Savage edits and writes Savage Love in. And so that was just part of Olympia culture. Oh, did you read Savage Love this week? You know, everyone, you would go to get a slice of pizza and someone would grab The Stranger and then read Savage Love. Everyone talked about it. It was awesome. And I had a lot of friends that were very sexually empowered in Olympia and would be like, you know, we're walking into their apartment. They're like, oh, cool, this box came. This is my new vibrator. Let's open it up and look at it. And it was just, you know, friends had threesomes and I was just always really curious. And I remember like reading Savage Love and people are always talking about like, oh, my friends and I had this like casual threesome the other night. I'm like, oh, why are my friends and I not doing that? Like, that sounds so cool. And I wanted to do all these things that at some point in my mid 20s or late 20s, I looked back and I was like, oh, I've done a lot of those things now. I just was 19. Like, it doesn't all happen at once. You have to just be patient.
But I love this question that you came to. What is your other sex like? I think that should be a question that we widely share, widely ask, and should become a common question. Just like, would you like to have our safer sex talk now?
Right.
You know, like, what is your other sex like? I love what is your other sex like? And I love the idea, and not many people do it, even in the sex positive community, of having a sex debrief. I had one lover who was like, so what did you really like? What really worked for you? What didn't work for you so well? And they wanted to, I don't want to think of it that way, right? I want to think of it as, you know, I don't know. What's the word for life? What's the Latin word for life?
Post vivum.
Post vivum. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like a post vivum. Yeah, what made you come alive? What didn't work for you so much? And that we could have those and they would be separate from the sexy time. But they would be also sexy.
Right.
Because we'd be like, oh my God, this was so good. But then we'd be calibrating and we'd be learning and we'd be like, ooh, next time I am gonna use my hand so hard. Oh, I didn't spank you hard enough. Oh, you are in for it.
The calibration is so important. And the bad sex experiences that I've had have always been when someone assumes that the way that they like things is universal and expects you to know that immediately. Whereas I'm like, oh, I'm going to touch you gently at first. And if I keep getting signals, then I'll move up and get harder. And then I'm like, oh, you want me to literally like grind my knuckles into your clit. Okay. Like I get the signal. I'm not going to start with that. And the most baffling sexual experiences I've had have always been ones where someone is like mad that I'm not doing something or that I'm doing something that I'm like, yeah, this is the first time we're having sex. Like, I'm moving slow and experimenting. Some people really like to have their neck kissed. Some people do not.
Right.
I can ask you that, but you're not going to give me a questionnaire at the beginning. I'm going to figure this out somewhat organically.
You're like playing a video game and trying to see where things light up.
Yeah.
You know?
Or I'm like, I got through this level and I got eaten by that monster and I know that I need to avoid that monster next time and then I'll do it. Because, you know, you might date one person who's like, oh my God, if you're going to go down on me, you need to stick a finger in my butt. The next person that you go down on.
It's like, no.
Like, that's not what I'm like, this worked last time.
I've really often experienced that after when I've had sex with someone who has been recently out of a long-term relationship, I get the sense that they are fucking just the way that person
they were taught.
fucked. And I am new person, but they are on programming.
Right.
And thinking that they're going to get the same reaction. And that rarely happens because people are alchemical together. And it's something different when you put that equation together, when you put those chemical substances together.
Totally. And it's the joy of finding that together, which is what I've always found so ridiculous when someone has this really intense kind of shitty attitude about it, where they're like, oh my God, are you an idiot? Like, why would you do that? Or like, why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, because like.
Have you experienced that kind of reaction?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Let me pee and then I'm gonna come back and.
Yeah, pee break.
I have to pee too.
So, yes, I am really kind of taken aback to hear that you've been essentially reprimanded for going slow and experimenting with a new lover. So
the best crystallization I can share of this experience, and that's not like something that happened all the time, but you know, from time to time, is when I was a wizard, I had a Tinder profile, and I believe it said, well hung psychedelic sex wizard, no hookups. Because I thought that was really funny.
Well hung, psychedelic
Psychedelic
sex wizard.
No hookups.
No hookups.
And then like a photo of me looking like a wizard. And someone messaged me and they were curious and they went and looked at my website and then they were asking about the wizard sessions that I do. And I said, well, they're like, oh, can you do one for me? I'm like, well, I kind of want to go on a date with you. I don't want to go do my work thing. So how about this? If you're up for it, I'll plan us a weird occult date. Are you into that? And she said, yeah, totally. So we met at a bar and I had come up with a list of maybe 4 things that I brought dice. And we were going to, I had her come up with one of them and then we came up with the last one together, I think. And then the agreement was we're going to roll the dice and then whatever number it is, we're going to do that activity and then we'll work our way through the date. One of them was a collaborative tarot reading. One of them was a sincere and honest conversation about sex. One of them, like her suggestion was like a break for her to go smoke a cigarette. And there was like a bunch of different things. And it was so cool because the dice rolled not in sequence, but it only rolled each number once. We never had to re-roll because we got something twice.
Magic.
We had this open and honest conversation about sex. You know, talk about what do you like? What do I like? And I was very clear that I'm like, oh, I like way more sort of meditative, exploratory sex. I'm not the like jackhammer type, like the like, you know, I can get there eventually, but I don't like to start with the like porn star, like I'm gonna throw you around the bed and just like go really crazy. I kind of find that I get, you know, tired and distracted doing that. And I like to be much more, oh my God, like every small movement is blowing my mind and I'm really in this zone. And she was like, yeah, totally. And just was absolutely on board with that. And at the end of the date, it went well. And she's like, we should go home together. I was like, let's go to my place. And we got home and we started fooling around. And it was so clear that she wanted some sort of insane jackhammer porn sex and did not know how to communicate at all. And so I would like go to touch her nipples and she's like, harder. Oh my God, have you like ever touched a boob before? And I was like,
whoa.
And I kept trying to like gently and like compassionately like
escalate.
Well, like escalate and also communicate and say like, hey, like I'm learning your body. You can ask me to do things in a nicer way. And I think it was one of those things where I think she was feeling awkward and the awkward came across as
brisk and
you know, bitchy,
judgmental.
And so we have this sex that I feel like I'm constantly trying to like convince her, like calm down. Like, yes, we can get there eventually, but like, I'm not going to just immediately start like slapping you in the face or anything crazy. And it's really awkward and it's not going great. And in my head, I'm like, wow, I hate having sex with this person. And then we finish and she's like, that was amazing. And I'm like,
whoa,
what? Like, were you having the same sex that I was having? Like, I thought that was a like Ricky Gervais comedy of errors that we just went through. Like, what did you experience? And then,
wow, that's also astonishing to me, right?
Yeah.
How different the experience can be, even though you've shared it and and the perspective
I was
from different bodies is shocking.
And I think this was really probably like, you know, maybe my second Tinder hookup. I really had not used Tinder much. And I was new to dating in New York. And I thought, okay, we had this really cute, like fun date, but then the sex was not good. The connection's not there. Like, okay. And so we ended the night and then she started texting me these kind of like booty call, like Netflix and chill ? Texts. And ghosting was very much like New York Times was doing articles about ghosting. And I had said, when I'm entering this Tinder pool, like, I don't want to be shitty. I don't want to do that to anybody. So it was very nerve wracking, but I got a couple of these texts and I was responding like, oh, I'm busy tonight or no. And then,
which is called icing, I believe.
But this was over a weekend. This was not like over a period of weeks I was doing this. This was one like or two messages. And then I quickly realized that this person really wanted to hang out more. And so I wrote them a little thing and said, hey, I had a really fun time on our occult date. I didn't really feel like the vibe was there. It was really nice to meet you, but like, I don't think I want to go on another date. And then got a really nice message back of like, thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate that so much. That's so much better than weird fucking mind games. So like, thank you. And then that was the end of that.
What a nice way for that to end.
Yeah, and did well. Communication wins always.
Seriously, I am your communication game. The communication is strong with you, my wizard friend.
Well, from, nervously ejaculating into someone without talking about it to sending nice non-ghosting messages. I've done a lot of growing.
You have. So, Kevin, can I ask you?
I'm just taking this all in this whole time. Mm-hmm. Yes, ask away.
Early memories of pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely have early memories of erotic pleasure, but not knowing really what it was. I remember really early memories of, like, taking my dick out when I was, like 3 or something. You'd be like, whoa, what's this weird feeling? And not knowing what to do with it at all.
You remember when you were 3?
I don't know how old I was. It was young. Yeah. And I remember I used to like to, this is like really revealing. I used to like to touch my butt when I was a kid too.
Yeah.
And like not really understanding what that thrill was, but knowing that it was kind of a thrill that I liked to like have a little anal play going on. Long before I ever masturbated. Like long before.
Do you remember being told not to touch your butt or that your butt was
this
dirty?
is all very private. I didn't let anybody else know.
How smart of you.
Yeah. I'm a kind of like secretive, private person when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yeah.
He said on the podcast.
But
what will he reveal now? Yeah.
I'm really curious how you knew that was supposed to be private, or maybe you didn't know that it was supposed to be private. Maybe you just felt internally that it was private.
I guess so. Yeah. Or I was just afraid to have the conversation. I like all through childhood, even still now, I really like to avoid conflict and avoid being in trouble. And so whatever I deem as being in trouble, I will take pains to avoid having that conversation. I mean, not that I was that conscious of it when I was like 5 or whatever, but...
You have these sort of mischievous eyes that lead me to believe that you also may have had some pleasure in getting away with things.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I love getting away with things. but there's also like this weird like shame component of it too, that I just didn't want anybody to engage with me around that topic. So like, going on from that, Devin and I had a very similar story about like early sexual memories. It's like finding dad's porn. I found dad's porn really young.
Yeah.
And
was there a stash somewhere?
Yep, for sure. And
closet.
Drawer by the bed. I found one day when I was home alone. I'm also the oldest of 4, but I have 2 sisters as well and a brother. Home alone and just poking around, found dad's drawer. And then I realized later on what dad's magazines that came in like the black plastic sleeve were in the mail, and he had this subscription to Penthouse magazine for like I mean, I'm a little older than Devin, so it's like 80s Penthouse, so it was like it was a very particular like aesthetic, I guess.
Like full bush, is that what we're talking about?
I'm not even talking about like physical attributes, but it's like that style, like raunchy, like sexy humor, that it seems to be characteristic of like 80s sex.
Sort of brassy and
like crass and brassy.
Loud.
Yeah. There's a lot of like cartoons and like joke sections in these like early magazines. I don't even know if they still are, but I just remember it was like hetero guy centric humor, and like thinking about it now, just being like, that was like really awfully sexist and like terrible, like awful jokes. Yeah, that's how I got into like porn and sex that way. Finding the
you already
stash.
know that it's something secretive because it's covered in black plastic.
Well, right, and it's like in a drawer.
And then the stash is in a drawer hidden by the bed.
Not for my eyes. And I was like, oh yes. It is. And so as soon as I found that, it was all bets are off. I was like, now that I know this exists, I'm going to go there every single time I'm home alone.
How old were you?
Younger than 10, for sure.
Old enough to remember what kind of porn it was?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the earliest memories of porn you have tend to get lodged in your brain, especially, this is my own theory, that if you come while you're watching a certain type of porn, that scene kind of gets like burned in your brain
early on, if it's like
yeah.
one of your first experiences of ejaculation.
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
absolutely buy that.
Yep.
It's also a theory of kink, right? That
mm-hmm.
an early indelible memory. It happens in Mercy Mistress, where they flash back, the guy's into feet, and they flash back to his babysitter covering.
Is that Poppy's?
Yes,
movie?
it's
Oh,
Poppy's.
Cool. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Mistress Yin.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a flashback to the babysitter covering his eyes because there's something that he's not supposed to watch,
Mm-hmm.
in the movie, covering his eyes with her feet. And he's like, right? And so that's one theory about kinkiness, is that it actually puts a kink in the brain where you start to associate that with sexual pleasure. I had a recent resurfacing of a memory in high school. I had a crush on this pretty young boy. He was maybe a year or two younger than my friend and I. And she played with him. She had interactions with him. And so one day I was over at her house and I'm like, you should invite him over. And she invited him over. I can't actually remember. This is where I can't remember what physically happened. I know we were all three in the room. Mm-hmm. I know that he wound up with his shirt off. I know he wound up with his pants off. I think that I kissed him. I think that he kissed both of us. She and I didn't interact. And then it escalated to the point where she was going down on him. And as I was watching her suck, I was 15.
Mm-hmm. 15, okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As I was maybe 16. No, I was probably younger because I graduated at 17. So I was probably 15 or 16. And I was watching her suck his cock, and he had a huge cock, and he was a very slender boy. Mm-hmm. And I had this maelstrom of feelings, and they were disgust and nausea and turn on and jealousy, and I had to leave the room. I was just overcome by this maelstrom of feelings. And exactly. And I just made the connection that I think at that moment I kinked, because I'm pretty sure thereafter after, my fantasy life has revolved around threesomes. 95% of which are with another woman. Mm-hmm. And me finding creative ways. So in Arousal, The Secret Logic of Sexual Fantasies, he creates this premise that fantasies are the creative means that we make it safe for ourselves to be aroused.
Okay, I like that.
And I dealt with a lot of self-worth issues, unworthiness, not enoughness. And it was a way that in my fantasy world, there was somebody else. There was another woman. So like my enoughness, I didn't have to be worried about that, right? It was a creative way to deal with that. Also, I felt a lot of jealousy and wound up binding jealousy up with arousal in this ingenious way to make something that hurts me or could hurt me into something that was powerfully erotic for me. And I think that was, in keeping with your theory, the moment that it
sure
kinked.
Yeah, and as you were talking about that, I'm like, what kinks of mine? I'm not like an especially kinky person, but I'm trying to remember like what did it for me then, that
might have threads throughout and might be playing throughout your erotic imagination.
Thinking like just how much I saw porn when at a younger age, like thinking, I put it together later on that I like to watch. I like to watch people and finding out ways to work that into, even with just one other partner, to like be like, why don't you masturbate? I want to watch you.
Yeah.
Or let's just do it together side by side and like watch each other. That's super hot to me. I figured that out much, much later, when I was, I worked with a sex therapist recently last year, and like a lot of stuff got uncovered through that understanding arousal of male sexuality. But watching mostly, when you're a kid, you watch straight porn, and it's all these women getting off. And realizing that I was, for a long time, wanting my sexual pleasure, my orgasms, to look and sound like as if I was a woman having those orgasms. Because that's what I saw in porn forever.
Which is, as you know now, performative and not necessarily happening. And
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Sorry, Devin.
Porn orgasms aren't real?
But you
sorry to disillusion you, darling.
at
when
least
you get into
wrestling's
the
still
good
there.
porn though, and find the porn that is actually real, you know, and you're like, this can look like that as well, even though that's performative to a degree as well. But you get into like good porn and not mainstream performative
Like
porn.
Erica Lust, feminist porn.
Totally, yeah, and where the orgasms are, if they're not real, they're at least very believable in terms of like what I've personally witnessed, you know, as a real orgasm.
And you're talking about the operaticness of the
Kind of like,
vocalizations.
so it's not just like a climb the mountain, you peak, you're down. You know, it's like this is the more like the wavy, you know, ups and downs, the kind of half orgasm, 3/4 orgasm, and then you go and you know, that's how at least I've been with women that way, you know, that I've observed. But wanting to kind of mimic that in how I experience sex and pleasure, I didn't put that together till much, much later.
And that meant that you were falling short of this ideal because you were not experiencing this kind of wave rolling crescendo.
Yeah, similar to what Devin was talking about, that like coming was frowned upon, or like something to delay for as long as possible, if not indefinitely. Realizing how much I learned from porn was a lot to unlearn later on, and a lot to unpack. And I totally fell down like this path of like believing that, you know, porn addiction was a real thing and a real bad thing, and just doubling down on the shame that I felt after every time that I looked at porn and I masturbated and I came, and I was like, immediately felt awful and immediately felt shame and just wanted to be like, clear every browser history, like burn my hard drive, you know, like really like scorched earth level of like wanting to eradicate whatever I just did because I felt it was impacting my real life sex life negatively.
You said
and
that.
I bought into that whole thing.
But what do you mean bought into it? Now, you don't believe that porn addiction is...
I don't believe that porn is the problem. And I don't even think that it's necessarily an addiction problem. I think it's a shame problem, and it's like how you talk to yourself about sex problem. I mean, I worked with a very porn positive sex therapist for a while about this to unpack this shame around porn, and she was just like, I'm gonna give you this book. It's called Ethical Porn for Dicks. and I think do you still have that book?
It's on my shelf right now.
Nice. It's kind of a silly book, but it was really helpful to unravel that myth that I've been telling myself, that it was porn's fault that I was quote unquote bad at sex, because my partner had been telling me I was bad at sex. And then I was like, oh shit, it's because of the porn, isn't it? And then it made me feel worse about myself. And then I'm like, well, it's not porn's fault. It's actually more my partner's fault for telling me a lot of negative stories that I believed about myself, that she made me believe. And I was like, yikes.
Like what?
Oh man. Oh, that porn was the problem, that I've been like basically cheating on her with porn, that I was a misogynist and sexist because I came too early and I never focused on her pleasure, even though she never really told me what she wanted, and was like a terrible communicator about all those things in the moment, and would say really judgy, shamey things to me as we're trying to have sex.
Ooh.
Which I don't even know how many fights we ended up having as we were trying to initiate sex. Big fights. And it's just like, that kills.
It's the opposite of eroticism.
It's absolutely the worst. and it just like, it made me feel like not wanting to have sex with anybody, let alone her, let alone vagina havers, period. I was like, maybe I just want to have sex with dicks. Like, fuck this. This is like way too hard. And I know that's like a really generalized statement, but like,
seems like a pretty understandable reaction to what was being thrown at you.
It was very reactive. Yeah, absolutely. And I just stopped having sex because I'm like, what if we get into a fight? I don't want to do that. Hell no. And so my sex life just shriveled up, and I put all of this energy into porn, which I felt bad about. And I was like, oh, I got to deal with this. So
I was about to point to Dominic in a recent episode. Dominic Q talks about he had a sex addiction and addiction to masturbation in particular. He would masturbate to the point of having scabs and would just then look for any real estate that was unscabbed that he could get at.
Oh, his hands.
And
or his
on his cock. Oof. Yeah. He talks about what he was trying, the emptiness he was trying to assuage with the porn, right? It wasn't the porn necessarily. It wasn't the masturbation necessarily. It was the way that he was doing it, the way that he was engaging with it.
And that's what I mean. It's not like porn's fault. It's not a porn addiction. It's a fear of something that you're trying to fill with this arousal. It's a dopamine response thing. We just want to get the hit because it makes you feel good, and you can and that way, I guess I do still kind of buy it that it triggers an addictive molecule in your brain, maybe. But I don't think it's essentially porn's. It's not the porn's fault, even though there's plenty of shitty, terrible porn out there that's just ew. If the lights came on, would you want to hang out with these people afterwards? Probably not.
I'm seeing it from this other angle, facet, is that you were actually just trying to cultivate safety.
In what?
Because the porn wasn't going to tell you were bad at anything.
Oh, exactly.
The porn was never gonna, never judge you, and it was a way that you could have a good drug in the brain without running the risk that you were going to be abused for it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the best things that the therapist told me, and she was this master of saying nothing and just saying one sentence, and I'd be like, you were a genius. Whoa. You're really good at your job. Wow. And she really is.
Who is she?
She is a kind of very prominent poly kink, very pro sex, pro porn sex therapist. So I was really analyzing myself about the kind of porn I watched, and oh my god, do I want to do that in real life? And having this real wrestling with my desires and what I was into. And then she was like, porn is just a fantasy. Sometimes you just need to have it be a fantasy. And I was like, oh,
yes.
Right. And I was like, sure, I'm gonna watch what does Dan Savage say, the porn stars that's learning how to drive by watching a NASCAR.
Reed says that.
And you don't exactly
by watching the Fast and the Furious.
Right. And sometimes you want to watch those movies because they're exciting. Sure. And you're watching performers.
These are the all-star Olympians of sex.
Exactly. And that's super hot to me. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you want to watch that. And I don't want to do that with my partner.
Right.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes, but it's very conscious. We're let's have porn sex. And we've totally talked about that. Yeah, totally. And we don't have porn sex all the time.
Oh, it's such a great distinction.
Yeah.
Also in the fantasy world. And when I learned that, and I think it was from Kenneth, that there are fantasies that are meant to remain fantasies. And the story that he tells is about a woman who had actually a farting fantasy. And then she experienced it and she was like, actually, I don't like it.
It's a private thing.
It's a brain thing. This is just something that gets me going when I think about it, and it needs to stay there. And there it is delicious, and there it is protected, and there it feels good. And it's not something that I want to make a reality of. And I think that's a question that most people don't ask themselves. Is this a fantasy that I really want to make happen? And maybe sometimes you don't know until you actually can bring yourself into the situation or can orchestrate a situation that is similar. But even asking the question is dismantling the premise that fantasy is what you want to make happen but haven't been able to yet. This episode was mixed and mastered by Christopher Leung of Audio Dojo. I'm truly grateful to have him on my team, and I've already learned a great deal from him in 1 week of collaboration. He does sound mixing, editing, and design, as well as original music for TV and film. and composes under the name Ninja Boy. You can find him on the interwebs at audio-dojo.com. My intro music was composed by Alan Markley, who is Plastic Cannons on Instagram. And my cover art was designed by Shauna Shea, whom you can hire on 99 Designs. In next week's episode, we will be treated to the story of how Devin became a wizard. And we get to hear them read some of the most pivotal wizard emails of their friendship. Become a patron on patreon.com/horizontalwithlila for access. Until next time, may you have someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. I'm looking forward to outdoor movie picnics in the park. And also, thank you. Thank you for getting horizontal.
How you doing? I have so much to say.
Do you feel a little more comfortable now? I thought if Devin went first, actually, it would be
It's
just
fine.
like easier.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I feel good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I have much to ask.
I got to that section of the email and I saw her name and I was like, I don't want to say her name.
Yeah.
And I kind of panicked for a second. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
I'm fine. Yeah.
I don't want you to be uncomfortable with what you share.
Oh yeah.
Unless it's. I'm sometimes uncomfortable with what I share, but it's. Mm-hmm. I know why I'm doing it, and I mean to be doing it, but I don't want.
Yeah.
You know.
I was actually kind of surprised at that at myself because I was like, I know what I'm gunning into here at this podcast. I've talked about this before, and I was like, oh.
Ooh.
And I was like, all of a sudden, it was like, oh, I don't know how many people listen to this podcast, but like, a lot of people could hear this. And I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I was like, because I've been kind of private about a lot of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But very open with Devin.
Yeah.
Like, you know the whole damn story.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a lot to say about what we're talking about right now, like a ton that I can talk about without mentioning her name and everything, you know. But it was just funny in that moment that I was like, fuck, I don't want to say her name.